to our April 9th media availability. We have all of our media, with the exception of one photographer, online with us. This is Catherine, and I will call on you individually after you've heard from the Mayor and then Adam Laughlin. Just a reminder that we're privileged once again to have interpreters Kevin Culp and Deanne DeAndrade with us to help us out, and we've been extremely grateful for their support throughout all of this. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you, Catherine. And first, I'd like to welcome Councillor Katarina out of isolation and back in circulation, who was the lone other member of council, though everybody by virtual means was part of today's Emergency Advisory Committee meeting. So it's great to see you, Tony, and welcome back. I'd like to acknowledge first, though, Dr. Hinshaw's sad news today. Heartbreakingly, we've lost another Edmontonian to COVID-19. And my condolences go out to the family and friends and colleagues who are grieving. We're very sorry for your loss. I hope that Edmontonians take this somber news as yet another reminder of the importance of practicing physical distancing and staying at home wherever possible. Please remember that we do together have some control over this pandemic. We can flatten the curve together if we follow the guidelines laid out by our health professionals. Now, we do live in an amazing community, and I know that people are still feeling the anxiety that comes with this pandemic, but at the heart of it, we need to remember how much we love our city. And we need to look at so much of the good that's happening even amidst our struggles. And I know our small businesses, so many of them are hurting right now. But amidst all this turmoil, I've been so impressed by many in our business community who've innovatively and rapidly adapted their business models to the COVID-19 reality that we've all found ourselves in at this time. Many of you may have seen a recent campaign called Here for Good, just one of the many campaigns that support local businesses generated by leaders here in our community. And I want to commend this campaign and others for showing how Edmonton can come together and support each other. So remember, supporting your local businesses means that you are supporting your community and your neighbors. And you can go, for example, to thingsthatereopen.com, which was built by Lift Interactive, which is a great Edmonton company with a little bit of help from the city in order to help people figure out where they can support businesses in our community here. We have a really amazing and resilient business community, and so many of our local businesses have been stepping up to be part of the solutions to also help fight COVID, whether it's manufacturing sanitizer or personal protective equipment. They've embraced this challenge and are showing once again how Edmonton can be a leader in a time of crisis. Now, speaking of that, Council today meeting as the Emergency Advisory Committee renewed the state of local emergency for another week. However, recent legislative changes were introduced to permit us to extend for up to 90 days, which we will explore in the near future if the legislation passes, though what we discussed today was maybe a 30-day window based on the current projections. Granola bar. Now, in light of the economic challenges that we're all facing together as a result of our current global pandemic, the City of Edmonton is working diligently to ensure that public health and safety remains our very foremost priority. And at the same time, we are seeking to provide some financial relief for our community members who are struggling and responding to our business community regarding their immediate and their long-term needs. Now, as you would have heard from our Premier earlier today, their interest, the provincial government's interest is in getting people back to work as soon as possible. And we absolutely share that priority and have been in close conversation with the Government of Alberta about the possibility of funding some economic stimulus projects to help create jobs and prevent future job losses, hopefully, here in our city. So in addition to what the Premier announced, we have provided to the provincial government or will be providing formally a list to the provincial government of shovel-ready projects for the 2020 and 2021 construction seasons. From Lewis Farms Rec Centre to roadway upgrades similar to what the province announced today, as well as important climate change and infrastructure like accelerated flood mitigation. Spending money on infrastructure not only creates jobs, but ideally, it's also key to ensuring that our economy emerges from this pandemic in a more resilient fashion and with all the co-benefits that strategic investment can get. So in addition, I'll be advocating to the province for further support for our city's small business revitalization enhancement program as well. Now on to some very important news. I have a message for our youngest Edmontonians. Easter is almost here, and I know many of you are wondering if the Easter Bunny will be able to make it to your home. And I'm pleased to say that I spoke with the Easter Bunny myself this week, and the Bunny wants to assure all of you that the Easter Bunny and his team will do their very best to deliver treats, but that they might not be able to make it to every home this year. And so as you can imagine, they're very, very busy with their own families at this time of year as well. So the Easter Bunny also wanted me to share this message. They wanted me to remind us that we can continue with Easter hunts, but that we should do so safely within our own homes. And because I know many of you are also wondering, I had a chance to connect with the Tooth Fairy, also an essential service, and the Tooth Fairy is continuing with their essential work here in our city. But again, we ask for your understanding because they might not be able to make it to every house this year and payments might get deferred. So Passover and Easter will also be different this year, but I do hope and trust and pray that Edmontonians still find ways to connect with family and friends and faith communities virtually. So have a great weekend, everyone, and I will turn it over to Adam to offer some city updates, and then happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon. Edmontonians can take steps to help us continue to protect our city. And I want to continue to remind everyone of the importance of staying home as much as possible, to make essential trips only and to maintain physical distance. This is how we prevent the spread. But we know Edmontonians do have to make some trips. Essential workers are traveling to their jobs, people are going to their grocery stores or their post office or hospitals. And we're going to take short breaks by walking or jogging in the river valley or leaving our homes to go for a stroll to get a breath of fresh air. Whether for work or for wellness, people still need to move, and we get that. We continue to take steps to make the trips a little easier and safer. We're urging everyone to limit their travel on public transit to essential trips only. This is critical to continue to protect the health and safety of all Edmontonians who are out for essential purposes. And this is also critical for our transit operators. All LRT passengers will now be expected to disembark at Century Park and Nate stations to allow for thorough and adequate cleaning of our LRT cars. Peace officers are working with our neighborhood empowerment teams to direct those who are traveling on transit without a specific destination to a shuttle service to either downtown or one of the social support locations in the city, such as the Expo Center. We are committed to finding the right balance between providing essential transit services in a safe manner to those who rely on it and providing community support for all Edmontonians in these very challenging times. This latest action on transit is one of many that we've taken over the past several weeks. And every decision we make is driven by a commitment to employee and public health and safety. As the weather warms up, more people will go outside to exercise and enjoy nature. We want to make sure that Edmontonians can do that safely. So we are automating pedestrian push-button signals at 56 busy and densely populated areas, including around hospitals. This means people can cross the street without pushing a button that others have touched. We also closed a lane of traffic on Saskatchewan Drive so that cyclists and pedestrians have more room. We also expanded the bike lane on Victoria Promenade to make more room. Cars will still be allowed along the remaining road in both of these areas, but these changes will ensure Edmontonians can safely practice physical distancing. I also want to remind everyone all playgrounds are closed, along with the city's 4 fenced off-leash dog areas, which were closed in part to ensure people don't touch the latches or gates, and those are Lauderdale, Paisley, Alex Decotu, and Manning Village. All remaining parks will require your dog to be on a leash at all times. And I understand that this issue has been raised a lot, and there's many questions, and as a dog owner, I do get this. So let me be clear. Putting dogs on a leash is to discourage mass gatherings and dog parks. Without the attraction of off-leash, fewer people will choose these 42 destinations. We do want to allow people to get out to the parks, but they must be spread out. Edmontonians have over 875 parks, and we have space that's needed to provide physical distancing. Please choose the off-peak times to visit. If you don't have a dog, don't go to a dog park. Use another space to reduce the congestion. If you're driving to a busy dog park or any other outdoor park space in Edmonton, please think about the distance between you and the people you're parking beside. Stay in your car until there's an appropriate time to exit. The majority of Edmontonians are following the rules, and we thank you and want that to continue. Enforcement officers will be out at the parks this weekend offering some education for those who aren't following the rules. On Friday, we will monitor in the parking lots at popular city parks to ensure they are not being overcrowded. If we see that people are not physically distancing and are not keeping their dogs in a leash, we will issue tickets. If it becomes necessary, we may close busy parks or the parking lots, and that may happen on Saturday morning. And if we have to think about closing parks in general, we may take that step. It's not something we want to do, but we need to ensure that we provide appropriate physical distancing measures, and we need Edmontonians to cooperate. We want to ask Edmontonians to enjoy the outdoors around their own neighborhoods and to ensure that they are maintaining appropriate physical distancing when they do. We don't want to be more restrictive, but we will be if we must to help keep Edmontonians safe. I'd also like to take this opportunity to remind Edmontonians that all used personal protective equipment, such as gloves and masks, should be safely discarded in garbage bins. There's unfortunately been an increase in litter outside of grocery stores and pharmacies recently. Of course, we want you to avoid littering at all times, but it's especially important for our community safety now. This week, the federal and provincial unemployment numbers were released. These numbers show a significant loss of employment in our city, our province, and across the entire country. We know that COVID-19 is having sweeping impacts on people, communities, and the economy in ways that we've never seen before. We know a lot of people are struggling, and we want to do what we can as a city to support you and get us all through this situation. As a city, we're doing what's necessary to respond to our immediate challenges, but we are also preparing for the future and planning for recovery in the weeks and months ahead. Right now, our focus is on the operational decisions and protecting public health of Edmontonians. We are focusing on how we respond. But in the weeks ahead, we will move to recover. And rest assured, we will recover. As the mayor mentioned, the holiday weekend is upon us, and I'll be honest, this will be a real test for our community. We can all influence how COVID-19 situations evolve by staying diligent and staying apart. I know this holiday will look a lot different for many of us, but it's important that we all continue to follow the direction of the public health officials. You must stay home as much as possible. Maintain proper physical distancing. Wash your hands frequently and for at least 20 seconds, and cover your cough or sneeze. It's tough not to hug family members, not to see your friends, but we can stay connected in other ways. Whether it's a text message, a video chat, or a phone call, we have to work together. That's our way out of this pandemic. We each have to do our part to prevent the spread. We are doing everything we can not to lose Edmontonians to COVID-19. It would be a tragedy to lose anyone to despair. If you are in despair, if you are struggling, please reach out for support. We recognize this is a difficult time for many. please access the support and resources available at edmonton.ca/COVID-19. We have a range of financial, mental health, and community supports available. We know this can be hard, but we will come together to support each other every step of this pandemic. Our community and our city has what it takes. We are connected, we are innovative, and we are resilient. These are unprecedented times in our city, and we are adjusting day by day to this new reality. We are practical problem solvers by our nature in Edmonton, and that character trait will be more valuable now and into the future. We'll continue to work with you and for you so that we can come out of these challenging times. We have the momentum we need. Again, please enjoy the weekend safely, practice social distancing, and stay home as much as you can. We will get through this together, and happy to take questions.
Thank you. I have all the media online, and the first question will go to Sarah Comedina with Global. Sarah, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So when it comes to the city providing direction for Edmonton festivals, why isn't there more of a push from the city instead of asking festival organizers to look at the province's forecast?
The approach that we're taking right now is with festivals to ensure that they're considering their next steps as it relates to the current requirements provided by the province. And I think if we're not seeing that, the city will take greater steps to encourage festivals to take the right step. In saying that, the requirements of the Alberta Health and Alberta Health Services essentially dictate that some of these festivals cannot go forward. And so as a city, we would support that. And with every festival, there's a permit requirement, and we wouldn't provide it. But we have a close relationship with our festival groups, and we just need to ensure that we stay aligned with them. And we may get to a point where we make a specific announcement related to cancellations, but we want to work with the festival community when we're doing that.
Follow-up to that question?
Yes. At this time, the city isn't saying if sports organizations like baseball and soccer should cancel their upcoming season or postpone. I'm just wondering how, what direction these organizations are getting from the city, really, if any. Those sports fields are supposed to open pretty soon here.
Well, so some of the sports authority have actually identified cancellation of certain activities, but we do want to give the sports organizations and the community leagues the potential to plan for the opportunity to have sporting events, the appropriate sporting events, should the time and the restrictions allow it. So it might not be planning for an event that's coming up within the next month or two, but if they're taking steps to prepare for a season, that they're doing it with the potential that it could be later in the summer season. But again, the restrictions that are in place by the province would not permit one of those activities from taking place. And so any planning or any steps that these groups take would only be from the future focus perspective, i.e. being prepared for the restrictions being relaxed in the future.
I'm going to go next to Dustin Cook. Dustin, go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you. Question for Adam. On the added security measures for transit, there was a call from councillors, to do more. What is being looked into? Is there an option for maybe a screening or questions with ridership down? Is there capacity to ask people if they have a destination? Is that an option, and what options are being looked into for that?
Yeah, those are things that I think all of those options that you just identified, Dustin, are things that we continue to look at as potentials to continue to mitigate some of the challenges that we've seen on transit. I think this most recent step where we're with the support of EPS and our peace officers, where we're removing individuals that don't have a destination by the end of the LRT line, and that'll expand to our bus system, is a step that we can manage the movement of a particular group or particular individuals that don't have a destination. But we are continuing, well, actually, I would say we're constantly looking at measures to improve and mitigate the issues that we're seeing on transit. And we have taken a number of steps, and it could include some sort of proof or verification that you do have a destination, and our task team was looking at something like that online, a potential recently. So we're constantly looking at those steps. Transit is an essential service, so we don't want to remove that. So we need to continue to take the efforts to mitigate the challenges that we're seeing. And there's a broader approach that we're taking, which is continuing to work at how we can mitigate some of the difficulties we've experienced related to the vulnerable population and accommodating them during this pandemic.
Justin, do you have a follow-up to that question?
I do, yes. As you touched on there, some residents may not want to go to the expo center. What then? What options are available?
Well, there's been additional centers that have been stood up. The Kinsman Field House is being operated. There's 180 spaces that are available there. The Central Lions has been stood up as North Central Lions has been stood up as another facility. And if we're continuing to see a desire for some to not attend these facilities, we continue to look at other options. And we have to work closely with the province and the agencies in the city to make sure we land on the right model. And that's ongoing active work that we have underway.
Thank you, Justin. I'm going next to Vinesh. Go ahead, please.
Hi, yes. Maybe this is a question for the mayor. If you can expand upon a little bit about what Adam was mentioning vis-a-vis the dog park. So obviously citizens are upset, but can you just reiterate why the specific rules are in place, and then just talk a little bit more about the enforcement and what could potentially happen depending on what happens this weekend in terms of activity at those parks?
Thanks for the question, Vinesh. The issue that we were seeing from inspections before the order came in was that there were essentially mass gatherings happening in some of the dog parks, and particularly in the fenced dog parks, there were too many people together, and that when dogs were interacting and people were pulling their dogs apart, they weren't able to maintain physical distancing. So rather than close all the parks, which is an option that a number of other jurisdictions have resorted to, we thought, the Emergency Management Agency, which is to say Adam and his team, thought, and they have the authority to make these decisions under a state and local emergency, that the fairest thing to do was to close the fenced dog parks and require dogs to be on leashes in the open dog parks in order to try to maintain physical distancing. We've had some feedback that people are frustrated by that change. I understand that it may be an unpopular measure for some, but quite frankly, compared to closing them outright, I think it was a reasonable step. But we have entrusted our emergency managers to make these decisions on an urgent basis in support of public safety and public health. And though we've had lots of feedback and council asked lots of questions today, I am going to continue to defer to experts to make decisions that are going to put a fundamental priority on public health, and those may come with inconvenience and disruption for people, and we fully expect to hear people's concerns about those, but these measures are for the protection of Edmontonians and the preservation of our healthcare system and essential services. And we stand behind them.
Dinesh, do you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, just a follow-up question, just in regards to the festivals and the sports fields. I know Adam mentioned that, they're kind of deferring to the, respecting the 15-person or less limit, but, we've seen from other cities, they've offered kind of clarity, Calgary, for example. So why not just provide that clarity in the here and now with respect to the need to be safe and socially distanced? Why not just, provide that clarity and just kind of get it over with?
Well, I think a time will come where we'll have enough information to say by a certain date festivals should expect to be canceled. But I think the other conversation that's happening is if that's going to come into effect, what mitigation can be put in place in terms of potentially postponing rather than just canceling outright. So I think our staff are trying to take as thoughtful an engagement opportunity with the festival organizers with the most current information that we have. Obviously, it's a fast-moving situation. Anything imminent has already been canceled. I know there are going to be disruptions to part of the festival season, but the major part of it is later in the summer, and it's too soon to say whether some of that might be able to go ahead. So we want to be very, very thoughtful about those kinds of decisions because they're going to be incredibly disruptive to those organizations. They're going to have implications for their sponsors. They're going to have implications for employees, and they're going to affect quality of life for Edmontonians. So when there's more to say on that based on the data and the modeling, then there'll be more to say about it. But in consultation with rather than dictated to the festivals.
Jeremy from CTV, you're online. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. I believe that Adam can answer. Just in regards to the this weekend sort of being a measuring stick, right? If things go well, things can stay the same. If they don't go well, you're looking at park closures and that sort of thing. If you do end up closing the parks, it seems like it's sort of getting close to almost like a stay-at-home type of order. What needs to happen? I guess what has to happen for you to consider that sort of thing and even consider these park closures?
So, I think to take the step to close parks, and this is similar to the approach that we took with the modification to the dog parks or the restrictions that we took with the dog parks. If we're observing that there isn't adherence to the requirements of Alberta Health, the public health orders, then we will take the appropriate steps. So it'll be evaluated based by our peace officers and bylaw officers on a site location basis. And quite frankly, we're not going to wait. If we do see folks that aren't observing and adhering to these requirements, we're not going to wait and take those steps. So the short answer is if we see incidents that the activity just wouldn't permit appropriate physical distancing, we will take the steps to make the closures. And it might start with, in some parks, just the parking lot, and see how folks react to that. And then if we're still seeing that, we would take the steps to close the park. And with this situation we're in, we absolutely don't want to do that. But quite frankly, and the mayor mentioned this, if it comes to public health or inconvenience, we're going to decide based on public health.
Jeremy, did you have a follow-up question?
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Is there a last question from anyone else on the line? I see none. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you being here. Have a happy long weekend, and we'll speak with you next week. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.